Good evening, and welcome to Truth Report. I'm Alex Truth, and tonight we are tracking a story that could reshape the geopolitical energy map as we know it. The United States and Iran are back at the negotiating table in Geneva, and the stakes couldn't be higher for global oil markets.
I'm Maya Clarity, and alongside those nuclear talks, we're following a deadly confrontation off the coast of Cuba, where an oil embargo is already strangling the island's energy supply. We've got new revelations about Jeffrey Epstein's financial influence reaching into the heart of British royalty, and a surprising setback for one of the most promising clean energy technologies in the e-bike space.
5 stories tonight, all connected by a single thread: energy, who controls it, and what powerful people will do to keep that control. Whether it's oil embargoes, nuclear enrichment, or the simple act of charging an electric bicycle, every one of these stories is about power in every sense of the word.
So let's get into it. We're starting tonight off the coast of Cuba, where a rare and violent confrontation has left 4 people dead and raised serious questions about just how volatile US-Cuba relations have become under this administration's energy embargo.
And trust me, by the time we connect all of tonight's dots, you're going to see a picture that should concern every single person paying an energy bill. Let's go.
Our top story tonight: Cuban border forces say they killed 4 heavily armed exiles who attacked from a US-registered speedboat off the island's coast. According to reporting from The Guardian, 6 others were wounded in what Cuba's Interior Ministry is calling an armed incursion into Cuban territorial waters. This is the most violent border clash between Cuban and US-linked forces in years.
Let's set the scene here. This wasn't some ragtag operation. The Guardian reports these individuals were aboard a Florida-registered speedboat, armed with what Cuban authorities describe as heavy weaponry. They allegedly opened fire on a Cuban naval patrol. Cuba says its forces returned fire, killing 4 and capturing the wounded. This happened against a backdrop that is absolutely critical to understand.
And that backdrop is the US oil embargo on Cuba. The Trump administration has been tightening the screws on Cuba's energy supply for months now. The island is already experiencing rolling blackouts. Fuel shortages are devastating. Hospitals are running on generators when they can get diesel at all. This embargo is not an abstraction, it is a humanitarian pressure campaign executed through energy denial.
So when you hear about armed exiles on a speedboat attacking Cuban forces, you have to ask the fundamental question: who benefits from destabilizing Cuba right now? Because an energy-starved island dealing with armed incursions is an island on the brink. And there are powerful interests in Miami and Washington who have been openly calling for regime change in Havana for decades.
The timing is especially telling. The Guardian also reports this incident coincides with a CARICOM summit where Caribbean leaders have been raising alarms about increased US military activity in the region. So you have Caribbean nations already nervous about American military posturing, and then this violent incident lands right in the middle of it.
Now, I want to be precise here. We don't have evidence that this speedboat operation was directed by the US government. But what we do know is that it was launched from Florida, on a Florida-registered vessel, and that the US has done absolutely nothing to prevent these kinds of operations historically. In fact, there's a long, documented history of CIA-backed exile operations targeting Cuba going all the way back to the Bay of Pigs in 1961.
And here's what makes this an energy story, not just a foreign policy story. Cuba's energy infrastructure is collapsing under the embargo. Venezuela, which used to supply Cuba with subsidized oil, is itself under sanctions. Russia, another historical energy partner for Havana, has pulled back its Caribbean commitments. Cuba is isolated, its grid is failing, and now it's facing armed attacks off its coast. That's not a coincidence, that's a strategy.
The people who suffer are ordinary Cubans. Families sitting in the dark. Patients in hospitals without reliable electricity. Workers who can't get to their jobs because there's no fuel for public transit. The embargo is a weapon, and it's aimed squarely at the civilian population. Whatever you think about the Cuban government, you cannot ignore the human cost of energy warfare.
And the silence from Washington on this armed incursion is deafening. No condemnation of the attack on a sovereign nation's patrol boats. No investigation announced into who funded and armed these exiles. When 4 people die in an armed assault launched from US soil, the least we should expect is accountability. So far, we're getting nothing.
Let's stay on the geopolitical energy map and move to Geneva, Switzerland, where right now, negotiators from Iran and the United States are sitting down, well, not exactly sitting down together. They're holding a 3rd round of indirect nuclear talks. According to Al Jazeera, the 2 sides are communicating through intermediaries, not face-to-face. And the energy implications here are enormous.
Let me break down what's actually at stake in these talks, because most coverage focuses on the nuclear dimension and misses the energy story entirely. Iran sits on the 4th largest proven oil reserves on the planet. Under sanctions, Iranian oil exports have been severely restricted, though not eliminated. China, in particular, has continued purchasing Iranian crude at steep discounts. A deal in Geneva could unleash millions of additional barrels per day onto the global market.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Middle East Eye is reporting that Iran is actively offering U.S. firms investment opportunities as these talks resume. Think about that for a moment. Iran is dangling access to its energy sector, oil, gas, petrochemicals, in front of American corporations as a sweetener for a nuclear agreement. This is energy diplomacy at its most naked.
The reporting from Middle East Eye suggests these aren't vague promises. Iran is putting specific investment frameworks on the table, signaling to U.S. energy companies that there is serious money to be made if sanctions are lifted. We're talking about one of the world's largest untapped energy markets opening up to American capital. ExxonMobil, Chevron, Halliburton, these companies had operations in Iran before the revolution. They have been waiting decades for this door to crack open again.
But here's the tension that nobody in Washington wants to talk about openly. The same administration that is squeezing Cuba's energy supply into the ground, that is maintaining maximum pressure on Venezuelan oil, is now entertaining a deal that could flood the market with Iranian crude. The inconsistency is staggering, unless you understand that the policy was never about principles, it was always about which energy flows benefit American strategic interests.
Al Jazeera's coverage of the Geneva talks emphasizes that this is the third round of indirect negotiations. The fact that they're still indirect, going through intermediaries rather than face-to-face, tells you how fragile this process is. But the fact that there's a third round at all tells you both sides see something worth pursuing. For Iran, it's sanctions relief and economic survival. For the US, it's about controlling the nuclear dimension while potentially gaining energy market access.
And let's not forget the regional context. Saudi Arabia is watching these talks with intense anxiety. The Saudis have built their entire economic strategy around being America's indispensable energy partner in the Middle East. If Iranian oil comes back online in a big way, that changes the calculus entirely. Saudi market share shrinks, oil prices potentially drop, and Riyadh's leverage in Washington diminishes.
So follow the money. Who benefits if a deal gets done? American energy companies get access to Iranian markets. Iran gets economic relief. Consumers might see lower oil prices. Who loses? Saudi Arabia, Russia, and other oil exporters who benefit from restricted supply. The entire OPEC Plus production cut framework could unravel if Iranian barrels flood the market.
And who's caught in the middle? The Iranian people, who have suffered under sanctions for years. Just like Cubans under the embargo, ordinary Iranians have borne the brunt of energy-related economic warfare, inflation, unemployment, crumbling infrastructure. Whether these talks produce a deal or collapse, the human cost has already been paid, and it's been paid by people who had no say in any of it.
There's also a profound irony here that we need to name. The United States is simultaneously trying to restrict energy access for its adversaries, Cuba, Venezuela, while potentially opening energy trade with Iran. The common denominator isn't democracy or human rights. It's strategic positioning. Energy policy is foreign policy, and foreign policy is about power, not principles.
Now let's shift to a story that might seem disconnected at first, but I promise you, it ties directly into the web of power and money we've been tracing tonight. Al Jazeera has published a detailed investigation into Jeffrey Epstein's links to financial meetings held at Royal Lodge, the Windsor estate home of the former Prince Andrew, now known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor.
This story is based on emails that reveal Royal Lodge wasn't just Andrew's private residence, it was a venue for financial meetings where Epstein played an advisory role. Let that sink in. The former prince's royal home, maintained at public expense, was being used as a backdrop for financial dealings influenced by a convicted sex offender. These aren't rumors or speculation, these are documented in emails obtained by journalists.
And here's where the energy connection comes in, because Epstein's financial network wasn't just about hedge funds and offshore accounts. His web of influence reached into sovereign wealth funds, Middle Eastern royalty, and the very energy-rich nations whose oil money fuels the global financial system. Epstein positioned himself as a connector between Western elites and Gulf state wealth. Royal Lodge was apparently one of the venues where those connections were cultivated.
The Al Jazeera reporting is meticulous on this point. The emails show that Andrew's financial advisors and Epstein were operating in overlapping circles, with meetings at Royal Lodge serving as a kind of informal boardroom for deals that spanned multiple jurisdictions. This is the intersection of old-world aristocratic privilege and new-world financial engineering, and Epstein was the bridge.
What's particularly damning is the institutional protection that made all of this possible. Andrew had access to Royal Lodge because of his position in the British monarchy. He had diplomatic connections because of his role as a trade envoy. And he had Epstein in his orbit because the establishment looked the other way for years, decades, really, while Epstein built his network of influence and abuse.
And let's be direct about why this matters beyond the scandal. The financial structures that Epstein helped facilitate, the offshore vehicles, the opaque investment frameworks, the handshake deals in drawing rooms, these are the same structures that enable energy wealth to be laundered, hidden, and leveraged outside of democratic accountability. When Gulf state oil money flows through networks connected to people like Epstein, it doesn't end up building schools or hospitals. It ends up in the pockets of the already powerful.
The British establishment's response to all of this has been characteristically inadequate. Andrew was stripped of his royal titles, yes. But Royal Lodge itself, the investigations into who else attended these meetings, the full scope of Epstein's advisory role, all of that remains murky. The institution protects itself above all else, and the people who deserve answers, Epstein's victims, British taxpayers, anyone who cares about financial transparency, are still waiting.
And that's the pattern we keep seeing, isn't it? Whether it's energy embargoes that punish civilian populations, nuclear talks that serve corporate interests, or financial networks that shield the powerful from accountability, the system works exactly as designed. It protects those at the top and extracts from everyone else.
One more note on this story. The timing of Al Jazeera's reporting is significant. This investigation drops while the British government is navigating its own energy transition challenges, while Gulf states are diversifying away from oil dependence, and while the global financial system is under increasing scrutiny for enabling exactly the kind of opaque dealing that Epstein specialized in. These stories don't exist in isolation. They're all chapters in the same book.
Now, let's pivot to a story that might seem lighter on the surface but actually reveals something important about how the clean energy transition keeps hitting walls that have nothing to do with technology. Electrek is reporting that the most promising wireless charging system for electric bikes has just encountered a major and unexpected hurdle.
For those who haven't been following this, there's been a company developing wireless charging technology for e-bikes, the idea being that you could park your electric bike on a charging pad and it would charge automatically, no cables, no plugging in. It's the kind of innovation that could make electric transportation dramatically more convenient and accelerate adoption. Last summer, this technology was generating enormous excitement in the e-bike community.
The concept is elegant. You embed charging pads in bike parking areas, at transit hubs, outside businesses. Riders park and charge without thinking about it. It removes one of the biggest friction points in electric vehicle adoption, the hassle of managing charging infrastructure at the individual level. For urban transportation, this could be transformative.
But according to Electrek, this technology has now hit what they're calling a surprise hurdle. And this is where the story becomes about more than bikes. The barriers facing clean energy innovation are almost never purely technical. They're regulatory, financial, and political. Incumbent industries don't go quietly. Standards bodies move slowly. Insurance frameworks aren't designed for new technology. And the funding landscape for clean energy startups remains brutally difficult.
This is a pattern we've documented on this show repeatedly. Promising clean energy technologies emerge, generate excitement, attract initial investment, and then slam into a wall of institutional resistance. Sometimes it's regulatory capture by fossil fuel interests. Sometimes it's the sheer difficulty of scaling manufacturing. Sometimes it's intellectual property disputes. But the result is the same: technologies that could reduce our dependence on oil and gas get delayed, diluted, or killed.
And think about this in the context of our other stories tonight. The US government will spend enormous political capital on oil embargoes against Cuba, on nuclear negotiations that protect fossil fuel supply chains, on maintaining the geopolitical architecture that keeps petroleum at the center of the global economy. But when it comes to removing barriers for wireless e-bike charging or other clean energy innovations, the urgency evaporates.
The e-bike market itself is a microcosm of the energy transition's promise and peril. E-bikes are already replacing car trips in cities around the world. They're cheaper to operate than cars, they reduce emissions, they ease congestion. But the infrastructure to support them, charging networks, protected lanes, parking facilities, consistently lags behind adoption because the political will to build it is undermined by automotive and oil industry lobbying.
So when you hear that a wireless e-bike charger hit a surprise hurdle, don't just see a tech story. See the system at work. See the same power structures that embargo Cuban energy, that negotiate Iranian oil access for corporate benefit, that protect royal financial networks. See those same structures ensuring that the clean energy transition happens on their timeline, not ours.
And here's the human cost that gets overlooked. Every month that clean energy adoption is delayed, communities continue breathing polluted air from fossil fuel combustion. Every year that charging infrastructure lags behind demand, potential e-bike riders stay in their cars, burning gasoline, contributing to the climate crisis. The hurdles aren't just business obstacles, they're public health failures.
Alright, Maya, let's bring all of this together, because when you lay these stories side by side, the pattern is unmistakable. Tonight we've covered 5 stories spanning Cuba, Geneva, London, and the American clean energy sector. On the surface, they look unrelated. But underneath, they're all the same story.
That's exactly right. Story 1, Cuba. The United States uses energy denial as a weapon against a small island nation, creating humanitarian suffering while armed exiles attack from U.S. soil with impunity. Story 2 and 3, Geneva and Tehran. The U.S. negotiates nuclear terms with Iran while American energy companies circle like sharks, waiting for sanctions to lift so they can access Iranian oil and gas reserves. The entire negotiation framework serves corporate energy interests dressed up as non-proliferation policy.
Story 4, Royal Lodge. The financial networks that move energy wealth around the globe operate through exactly the kind of opaque, elite access channels that Jeffrey Epstein specialized in. Gulf oil money, Western financial engineering, aristocratic privilege, all meeting behind closed doors while democratic institutions look the other way. And Story 5, the e-bike charger. Even modest, practical clean energy innovations face institutional barriers that fossil fuel technologies never had to overcome.
The through line is this: the global energy system is not a free market. It is a managed system, managed by and for the most powerful nations, corporations, and individuals on the planet. When energy access serves their interests, it flows freely. When it threatens their interests, it gets embargoed, sanctioned, regulated into oblivion, or simply starved of investment.
And the people who pay the price are always the same, ordinary citizens. Cubans sitting in the dark. Iranians struggling under sanctions. Communities breathing fossil fuel pollution because clean alternatives can't get to market fast enough. Taxpayers funding royal estates where shady financial deals are cut. The system extracts from the many to benefit the few, and energy is the mechanism.
What makes this moment particularly dangerous is the convergence of these pressures. We have an administration willing to weaponize energy access against adversaries while simultaneously courting energy deals with other adversaries when it's profitable. We have a clean energy transition that is technically feasible but politically obstructed. And we have financial networks connecting all of it that remain fundamentally unaccountable.
So what do we do with this information? First, we follow the money. Every energy policy decision, every embargo, every sanction, every trade deal, every infrastructure investment that doesn't get made, ask who profits. Second, we demand transparency. The meetings at Royal Lodge, the terms being discussed in Geneva, the regulatory barriers facing clean energy, all of it should be public. And third, we refuse to accept the narrative that any of this is inevitable. These are choices made by powerful people, and they can be unmade by an informed public that demands better.
That's the mission of this show every single night. Not to tell you what to think, but to give you the information you need to see the system clearly and to hold power accountable. Tonight's stories are tomorrow's policy battles. Whether it's Cuba's energy crisis, Iran's nuclear negotiations, royal financial scandals, or the future of clean transportation, these are all fronts in the same fight over who controls energy and who profits from it.
Before we go, I want to leave you with this thought. The Guardian reported on 4 people killed off the coast of Cuba. Al Jazeera documented financial dealings at a royal estate. Middle East Eye revealed investment offers flowing between Tehran and Washington. Electrek tracked a setback for clean energy innovation. For different outlets, for different continents, one story, the story of power, energy, and who gets to decide how both are distributed.
And that's why independent journalism matters. Not one of these stories would exist without reporters doing the painstaking work of obtaining emails, verifying claims, tracking money, and asking uncomfortable questions. If you value what we do here on Truth Report, share this episode. Talk about these stories. Don't let them disappear into the news cycle.
I'm Alex Truth. Thank you for watching, thank you for thinking critically, and thank you for demanding the truth.
And I'm Maya Clarity. We'll see you tomorrow night. Until then, stay informed, stay skeptical, and never stop asking who benefits. Good night.